Hello, my name is Reese Pugachev, pronouns he, him, and this is my presentation on food deserts for SOCI 347. So, what we're going to go through is what is food insecurity, defining what a food desert is, and food deserts versus food insecurity. What do they have to do with each other? And how do food deserts occur, and some solutions to food deserts. All right, so what is food insecurity? And this is from the textbook, and they talk about food insecurity as inadequate or insecure access to food due to financial constraints. And they also mention that food insecurity and poverty go hand in hand. Living in poverty often means a lack of food, poor housing, cold houses, isolation, a lack of opportunity, worry, despair, etc., among a million other things. So that's food insecurity. So what is a food desert? And this is according to the Oxford English Dictionary. A food desert is a place where it is difficult to buy food, especially referring to a populated area, urban settings, containing few establishments selling cheap, nutritious, fresh food. So this is very broad, but that is essentially what a food desert is. It isn't literally a desert. It usually refers to urban communities. So what does a food desert have to do with food insecurity? Yes, they're kind of the same thing, where a food desert describes an actual location. Hey, sorry, my cat. Describes a location where food is difficult to find, whereas food insecurity describes a socioeconomic conditions in which food is scarce. So one can cause the other, and the other can cause the other, vice versa. And though I will note that it is, of course, possible to live right next to a grocery store or even work at that store and still experience food insecurity. However, for the sake of this presentation, we're going to go with overgeneralizations, and I'm going to focus on food deserts and how they occur in urban settings. So that's what they have to do with each other. They're very interwoven and interrelated all the time. If you have a conversation about one, you're talking about another always. One is just more physical, and the other one is more socioeconomic. So how do food deserts occur? They have everything to do with distance from affordable food stores or places that sell nutritious foods, etc. And of course, quality and affordability have everything to do with it. Sometimes you're surrounded by only cheap, low-quality foods that are not very nutritious, or you're surrounded by very expensive but very high-quality foods. And absolutely, neighborhood development has everything to do with that, where groceries, stores put their stores, and where and when and how they decide that. So, first of all, let's focus on distance. So, this is from Beyond the Supermarket Solution, Linking Food Deserts, Neighborhood Context, and Everyday Mobility by Jerry Shannon. So, distance has to do with the proximity that a person or community has to affordable, nutritious foods, compared to corner stores and fast food locations, where maybe those are a little bit closer and usually lower quality of nutrition and so forth. And by analyzing these distances, this geographic distribution of all what kind of stores are where, and against demographics like ethnicity, income, housing, a million other things. And a spatial analysis of food deserts can identify areas that combine geographic access to healthy foods with high levels of social deprivation. So this is again where poverty, food insecurity, and food deserts all go hand in hand. Distance is but one of the things that expresses that and shows it in a way that is extremely physical and easy to see, hopefully. So the other section is quality versus affordability, which we've already kind of talked about. So this is again to do with what stores are selling. So within chains and store categories, food offerings, price, and quality can range across neighborhoods. And Shannon used the example of Whole Foods, which I believe is the American version of Community Foods, or in Red Deer, Nutters. Lots of organic food, very high quality. So they differ substantially from discounters and they call it Save a Lot, so that made me think of Save On. And chain such as Walmart and Trader Joe's. So again, this is American, but it still definitely applies, because we do have a lot of similar stores, like Save On or Safeway and stuff like that. So what he's saying is that quality can vary, and with quality varying comes price variability, and like he says, that can range extremely widely across neighborhoods regardless of what your income level might be. Those stores end up in sometimes what might appear to be the oddest places. Alright, so here's where we get to explaining a bit of that neighborhood development. So food deserts can occur because of a lot of higher up decisions, if you will. So the stigma around concentrated poverty and racialized neighborhood spaces can affect the perceptions of both people and places within the neighborhood, including food sources. As a component of the retail landscape, food retailers might be responsive to neighborhood stigma, whether through lower capital investment in stores located in high poverty areas or avoidance of stores by consumers. So this breaks down to when a company wants to open a new store, where are they going to locate it? And a lot of those stigmas can inform that decision, very much so. And because, of course, their motivation is profit, and they're probably not going to make a whole lot of profit if they put their new building, their new store, in a place that is apparently high in poverty. So, and then on top of all of that, it's how the customer is treated. So if a higher end food store, if the employees or even the environment of the store itself discourages folks who may not be able to spend a whole lot of money, that can definitely be a deterrent from going there again and purchasing food. Sometimes regardless of the price, whether it's cheap or not, they might just not want to go there because, again, that environment or how they were treated can encourage them not to go there again. So some solutions that have been proposed to food deserts, and there are problems with all three of these. I could write an entire essay on each one. Though some of them, I suppose, have their heart in the right place. So I will say positives and negatives about both, about all of them. So urban farming is where you essentially open up your backyard or your front yard, and instead of having it as just, lawn, grass, or gravel, whatever it might be for you, is to start turning all those green spaces into gardens where you can grow vegetables and, again, more healthy foods, herbs and the like. And that is a really great idea in theory, because the idea behind it is that you share all of that crop, and that like, regardless of whether or not it's on your property, like, maybe, like, it really depends on who's proposing it, how they decide to execute the plan. So sometimes it can be a nonprofit group maybe that is really focused on urban farming, so they are the ones that go out and tend to the gardens and make them and create them in the first place. And perhaps they are the ones that also collect and harvest the food and then are responsible for distributing it in that neighborhood. Or it could be just a community driven, so like everyone has to take care of the garden, and thereby everyone is able to take from the garden, regardless of how much or how little. And I'm sure you can already think of the problems with that, because without regulation, systems can be abused very easily. And not only that, even if you do go to the lengths of doing your best to trust everyone and to make sure that, that egalitarian motive is adhered to, there's also a lot of bureaucracy and red tape to jump through, because you're going to have to talk to the city, and you're going to have to talk to landowners, and landlords, and apartment buildings and their companies, and never mind speaking to the renters, because the renter can be all for it, but the landlord maybe not. So, and that all comes down to property value too, which is very concerning for literally all of these parties, except maybe the renters. So again, lots of positives, but lots of negatives. And community gardens are usually done by a community-focused company or organization. For example, I've seen libraries do community gardens. I've seen schools and churches, of course. So community gardens differ from urban farming because they are designated plots that one gets assigned. So like, you have to apply to get a community plot garden, and sometimes that costs money. It usually does, and it's usually probably more than folks can afford, and more than you will get out of that plot of land, because they're usually quite small. And there could also be restrictions on what you can grow there, depending on where it is and how the community garden is set up. Most of them are set up as elevated plots, so they're basically just giant wooden bins, like, just sat on top of like regular grass. So again, this can come with a few barriers, but more specifically the cost, and also location. This means that you have to travel to go see your garden and to tend to it. And that can be a lot of work and time that some folks don't have, especially if they're living in poverty and working is probably the only thing they have going on. And it's the only thing keeping them going, and to get anything, food in their mouth. And again, it depends. It is a good way of kind of compromising with urban farming by regulating it a bit more. However, their size is so restricted. Community gardens are often very small, and as such, each space is very popular and sought after, so it's difficult to get one. And more certainly, these gardens cannot sustain an entire neighborhood, let alone one person. So, again, lots of negatives and lots of positives. So it's definitely a battle. And then nutrition education is one of the things that was suggested in my readings, particularly by Shannon, among other sources. Even the textbook suggested nutrition education as well. So there are some positives with this. So you're teaching what foods are healthy, what foods aren't, and what you can maybe do with very little. And I think that is probably one of the best things that might come out of nutrition education, is kind of cooking lessons in a way, and how to make more out of less, if you will. And some of the negatives, however, is that it's a lot of folks already know what's unhealthy, and they are perfectly aware that their diet might not be the best. It's just all they can afford or all they know how to do. So again, that's where those like kind of cooking lessons would come in handy. However, again, it's about affordability. If you can't afford to buy meat, for example, as a source of protein, or eggs, which can also get quite expensive, then, like, you would rather sink that money into bills. For example, keeping the lights on, keeping your water on. So it's a huge compromise, a huge work and compromise every time you come up with a grocery list, for example. Like, no matter how educated you are, there's only so much you can do, there's only so much you can spend on food, and that's where those limitations come from. In addition to the factors we talked about before, distance being, I only have maybe 2 hours to go grocery shopping on this day, and then I have to go straight to work or something like that. That really limits where you can go in a city, regardless of where you live. And in Red Deer, it might be a little bit easier if you have a car. However, if you're dealing with public transportation, you're going to one location tops, and then you're carrying all that home with you. So it's not an easy decision, and it happens every time you have to go out and buy something. So yeah, there's a lot that goes into food deserts and compromising with them. So again, lots of negatives, lots of positives. And certainly I don't think that any of these are really great solutions, but I think they're going in the right direction. And if you want to know more about that, I'll write an essay. And here are my citations. So that's the end of my presentation. I chose food deserts because it's something that I studied before, and it's something I really wanted to get into, as much as this project is just a general overview. But yeah, and I hope you really enjoyed that, and see you next time.